Welcome into another episode of the Football Guys Fantasy Football Show. I'm Dave Kluge, joined with Bob Harris. And Bob, last week we kind of set the table for what could be a fun week of free agency, and today we feast. There is so much to discuss. I mean, it seems like every domino has fallen already.
Yeah. There's still a handful out there, but there's been a lot of activity, a lot of attention put on the Max Crosby situation as well, adding a layer of chaos to especially like Monday and Tuesday. It was pretty much off the charts those days, and it slowed down a bit then, but still some nice moves happening, and some that are going to have fantasy impacts. You and I were talking just before we came on, like a lot of the impact is going to be beyond the players signed to the players already there, left behind, or in new places.
Absolutely. And that's what we're going to try to do is kind of think outside the box. Like, yeah, it's really easy to say Alec Pierce got a mega contract. He's a winner. But like, let's talk about the ripple effects that has and some of the winners and losers from these transactions. Let's start with the big news that came in yesterday. Probably the poorest kept secret in the NFL. Kyler Murray signs with a veteran minimum contract to go to the Minnesota Vikings. So, Bob, takeaways here. What does this mean for Kyler Murray? What does it mean for JJ McCarthy? What does it mean for Trey McBride, Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, Jordan Addison, Marvin Harrison Jr.? There are so many players that I think are impacted by this move.
Yeah, for JJ McCarthy, the news is not good. The list of players, quarterbacks who have gone in the first round who have lost their jobs or not kept them, or it's not, there's not been a lot of success with that. Trey Lance, Paxton Lynch, Johnny Manziel come immediately to mind. None of them ever made it back. That doesn't mean redemption arcs aren't things. And maybe that's what we see with Kyler Murray here, who, came into the draft, came into the league as the first pick overall in the draft, had some initial success. And by the way, not without fantasy success along the way the entire time. That rushing equity he has makes him playable for us pretty much no matter what. We just need him to have a job. But injuries the last few years have been an issue. He goes to an offensive ecosystem that's known for being great for quarterbacks. Is he a Kevin O'Connell prototypical quarterback? He is not. So that's going to be interesting. We'll have to see some adjustments there, but you have to view this as good news for Justin Jefferson, who finished last year as wide receiver 20, but it was much worse than that. I mean, like, if you look at the
wide
finish,
receiver 42
right,
with JJ McCarthy.
Right. It was horrible outcome. And so I've always said, he had a quarterback proof card. We can go back to 2 years ago when Kirk Cousins was hurt and McCarthy and Jefferson came back from a hamstring injury of his own. And he was wide receiver 3 with Josh Dobbs, Nick Mullins, and what was it, Jaron Hall. So
right.
I mean, he was dominant, right? So there's hope here for him to rejuvenate. Jordan Addison also obviously become someone, that maybe moves back into wide receiver 3 territory again, or becomes a playable asset. So mostly good for everybody, not good for JJ McCarthy.
Yeah. Now, something I noticed when I was writing my article about Kyler Murray yesterday, and maybe I'm big braining this a little bit, but there have been a lot of quarterbacks under Kevin O'Connell that have that high pedigree, guys who are drafted, top 3 in the draft. Of course, we've got Jared Goff, maybe not the best success story for Kevin O'Connell, but, looked decent with him. And then, of course, Matthew Stafford wins his first Super Bowl with Kevin O'Connell. And then we get Sam Darnold coming in there and completely resuscitating his career. I think the myth of the Kevin O'Connell University has maybe gotten a little bit too big when we say that Daniel Jones, just by being in his mere presence for half a season, completely turned his career around. But is this the type of impact you're expecting Kevin O'Connell to have on Kyler Murray?
I think if he just gets some, I think this is an opportunity for Kyler Murray to make Kevin O'Connell look very good, right? Like if we get peak Kyler Murray, what do we have to go back to 2020 or whatever? Quarterback 2? Did he finish? I mean,
Josh Allen,
the rushing equity, he's willing to throw the ball down the field. Seems like, as we moved on in Arizona, there was some reluctance to, put the ball up for his targets. I'm hoping he doesn't have that issue with Justin Jefferson. I doubt he will. He'll probably hear about it. But yeah, I think like, maybe we're putting too much on O'Connell, but he has been part of this. He knows how to get the most out of these guys. And clearly, I've talked about that redemption arc. He's been a part of that for multiple players. So I'd love to see him be that for Kyler Murray as well, who gets to play for his childhood favorite team. And so, a lot of great stories here. I think the big takeaway for us as fantasy investors is the price probably isn't going to rise up to unacceptable levels, right? Like if he still there may be people who view him as a quarterback 1 or take that chance on him. Good luck to them. But if I can get him as a high quarterback 2 at the top of the quarterback 2 ranks, I'll take a chance on that upside all day, as long as I have a solid steady Eddie ahead of him.
Yeah, and you talk about it, the rushing. He is fourth in the league in rushing yards for a quarterback since coming into the league in 2019. He's seventh in fantasy points per game. So he definitely overstayed his welcome in Arizona. Losing record, lack of playoff success, but those things don't really matter for us in fantasy football. Like if you're rushing the ball a lot and you're throwing the ball to Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, I can talk myself into getting excited about that. So this guy, he consistently gives us at worst kind of back end QB1 production. So assuming he sits in that tier, I'm going to be drafting him pretty aggressively in drafts this year.
Yeah.
Spending a lot of time on Kyler Murray. We're not going to spend 5 minutes talking about every single player here, but Malik Willis is another very interesting player to discuss. Followed Jeff Hafley from Green Bay down to Miami. Again, one of the poorly kept secrets. We kind of knew this was going to happen, but we don't know a lot about what this offense is going to look like. Now, if this was a Mike McDaniel offense with Malik Willis, Devon Achane, Jalen Waddle, I'd be getting very, very excited, but we don't know exactly what this is going to look like here. So for fantasy purposes, how are we looking at Malik Willis? How are we feeling about Jalen Waddle, Devon Achane, and the rest of the Miami Dolphins?
I like the odds. I like Jalen Waddle is going to be a guy that I'm going to be looking at drafts right now. Watching his ADP is really reasonable. There's a chance that he really emerges as that number one threat with Malik Willis. Assuming we see the Malik Willis we saw in his 11 appearances in Green Bay. 3 starts, completed 78.6% of his passes, 972 yards, 6 touchdowns, no interceptions, brings some rushing equity as well. I like the landing spot. Like there were 2 landing spots that seemed, Miami and Arizona for the obvious reasons. The connections with Mike LaFleur with Matt would have some inside knowledge, but who better than the guys? John Eric Sullivan, by the way, the GM in Miami also comes from Green Bay. They've been around this guy every day. They know the work ethic. They understand where he's come from. And if you remember, he was pretty bad. It was pretty bad in Tennessee. He gets to Green Bay. Coaching apparently matters. I'm always mindful of another Green Bay Packer. I'm old enough to remember a guy named Matt Flynn, who turned a very narrow band of high-end production for the Green Bay Packers into a big contract in Seattle, only to be supplanted by the rookie Russell Wilson right off the get-go. So, but that's a gamble Miami's taking, but they're not making it blind. They're making it with some information that probably we don't have, and what we have is pretty good. So I like the pieces there. I like that Sullivan has talked about Waddle and Achane as building blocks. We know Achane's super capable as a receiver and can make some hay there as well. So I think I feel like this is a smart gamble for Miami. I don't know if it's a smart gamble for fantasy investors. The price will be dirt cheap. If you want to go with it, it's perfectly fine. I think that's, you're not going to pay an exorbitant price. And those are the kind of plays that can be league winning moves.
And I think you're spot on there. We're not at the point in the offseason yet where we're dissecting ADP and all this sort of stuff. But we saw last year, quarterback is deep. And the guys who paid up for quarterback in their fantasy drafts, more often than not, regretted it. The guys who just sat back and waited and took whoever fell to them and streamed off the waiver wire, that seemed to be the winning recipe last year. So we're talking about Kyler Murray potentially falling as a back-end QB1. Malik Willis probably falling like the QB20 range. These are the darts that I want to be throwing late in drafts rather than paying up for the guys who were running hot last year that can cool off this year. Before we keep talking about more players, if you're watching on YouTube, do us a favor, give us a thumbs up, leave a comment down below. Both of these things are going to help this show grow, and we would appreciate it greatly. Now let's get right back to the show because we have a lot to discuss. Daniel Jones returning to the Colts. Not only did he return on what we thought was going to be a short deal, but they gave him a 2-year, $88 million extension. Bob, I crunched the numbers. Daniel Jones will have made over $200 million in career earnings by the time he turns 30 years old. It's quite a good run for Daniel Jones, considering he's been, league average quarterback. He's doing pretty well for himself financially.
Last year, he was not league average, though. At least in the games he was healthy, he came out of the chute. And you mentioned the time with Kevin O'Connell. Also, Shane Steichen. Anthony Richardson is what sticks in our memory, but we should look back to Justin Herbert, Jalen Hurts, both quarterbacks who developed nicely under Steichen or with Steichen as part of it. Jones was quarterback 5 over the first 10 games last year. Finished his quarterback 10. Had kind of a rough late season run. The interceptions and turnovers started becoming an issue again, something that's been a bugaboo his entire career. But for the most part, completed 261 and 384 passes. That's 68%. 19 touchdowns, just 8 interceptions. He has the 5 rushing touchdowns. He's not without rushing equity. Don't make him run a long ways. He will fall down at some point. But he is capable in that regard. Look, he's a good fit for this offense. We'll talk about Alec Pierce and the move of Michael Pittman, but there have been some interesting moves. But you have Jonathan Taylor there, who is going to be a guy that's going to take heat off quarterbacks all day long. So I think this is the best outcome for Daniel Jones and people interested in him.
So when I look at what the Colts did last year, I can't help but think about the 2024 New Orleans Saints, where for the first month of the season, they were the best offense in football. Like they had just completely figured it out, off the charts in every efficiency metric we care about. And then they just cratered after that and didn't really recapture that magic. When I look at the Colts, I see a very similar trajectory, but how much of that downfall are we just chalking up to the injury? Because even you talk about it before the bye, there were the sacks, the interceptions, the fumbles, there were all these things wrong. But then we found out that he was playing on a broken leg. And then while playing through the broken leg, then he tears his Achilles. So clearly some injury issues there. Do you think that's what caused that fall off after the first month of the season? Or do you think the league kind of figured it out?
Maybe a little bit of both. So the truth, I like to look at the first 10 games when he's fully healthy. The Colts were 8-2. Top 6. Jones was top 6 in completion percentage. They were averaging about 30 points a game, 31 points a game. That fell off to like 28, during the start of the nosedive until Jones was lost against the Jaguars. And then, then it cratered. So I don't know that the cratering was, maybe it was injury related. But I'm going to put more stock in that 10-game run to start the season than I am the next 4 games or through 2 games and the subsequent fall for the rest of the team.
Next one, we're going to talk about Tua Tagovailoa signs with the Atlanta Falcons. Bob, I feel like this one, we're just blindly speculating here. We don't really completely know what's going on. I assume if Michael Penix is healthy for week 1, he'll probably be the starter. This could be kind of an early season bridge while Penix returns, but maybe Tua just comes out and outright wins the job. Like I said, I think we're kind of blindly speculating here. Do you have any insight that I might be overlooking?
Yeah, well, I don't know if you're overlooking it, but I think you set the table nicely. To me, Michael Penix has been saying for quite some time, and I know the initial reports said it was a partially torn ACL, whatever. It still got repaired. Still going to take time. He says he's going to be ready for week 1. I don't know.
Everybody's surgery at this point in the offseason goes well, and it was much smaller than expected. Everything's a success, right?
It was timely, at least. Like some of these guys, they have the MCL damage or whatever. They have to wait the 6 weeks or what to get the ACL repair so they can start the rehab. Like, Patrick Mahomes' case, quick surgery, quick start to rehab. Great news. Penix seemed like a similar thing, but nonetheless, I mean, he was okay. I don't know. It wasn't too long ago that Tua has put up some phenomenal numbers. He led the NFL in passing yards in 2023 at 4,600 passing yards, 29 touchdown passes, played all 18 games, didn't get hurt, So I think a lot of the concerns around him have been about the big contract he signed, his injury risk, and the fall off. And I don't know if that was all his. He's been inconsistent, for the most part. I'm being kind. Pretty inconsistent early last season, and then just finally forced his benching. So he'll need a redemption too. I feel bad for Kevin Stefanski. You'd think he'd walk into at some point a situation where there was actually a quarterback. I think the tell here is Matt Ryan talking, I think right before the combine, probably at the Super Bowl or just after the Super Bowl, that, they're not going to commit to a starter. That tells you something right there. And so it is going to be a competition. We'll see who wins. I'll be surprised if Tua is not the week 1 starter, but not crazy surprised.
And a little side note to this news as well is that they finally released Kirk Cousins. It feels like we've been hearing like that they're going to release Kirk Cousins for years. It finally happened. So Kirk Cousins on the market as well. We're hearing some smoke about him potentially being tied to the Raiders as kind of the veteran bridge while they get Mendoza up to speed. Still waiting for that domino to fall. Last quarterback we're going to talk about here, though, Geno Smith. Reunion with the Jets. I don't think anybody saw this one coming, but Geno is back in New York. What do you think is happening here? Do you think that maybe they spend that early first-round pick on Ty Simpson, use Geno as the bridge, or are they just fully committing to Geno Smith, hoping that he kind of figured it out during his time in Seattle?
I think anyone who's watched the last 2 years of Geno Smith would have a hard time fully committing to a guy who's thrown 50 interceptions over 2 seasons. Not all on him. I mean, It's been some bad circumstances. I don't know that he's going into great circumstances. He has a handful of weapons here. Garrett Wilson, I will say, is going to be criminally underrated or at least underdrafted. I'm doing some drafts of early best balls right now, and just the price has been phenomenal for a guy who had a 30% target share, and I don't see that changing, while he was healthy last year.
Bob, where's he going? 4th round, 3rd round?
After that.
Really?
Yeah,
well, all right. Like I said, I haven't dipped my toes in the drafting streets yet, but if that's where he's going, I might have to.
Yeah, tail end of the 3rd in the most recent one, but I've seen it into the 4th, and I think that's crazy value right there. Tail end of the 3rd is pretty good value to me. So So yeah, so I think that, and we'll see what Mason Taylor can do and Breece Hall, but in general, like, I guess when you look at the Jets, you say, how could it be worse? Well, every time I say that about somebody, it often gets worse. So it could get worse if we see last year's Geno, right? Like just the turnover machine or the last 2 years. But if we get something closer to 2022, 2023 Geno, maybe I'll be very excited about it. I mean, it's not that long ago that he played pretty well. I don't think he has the supporting cast or the support in New York to get that done, but and nobody should be drafting him like that. He should be well outside your quarterback 2 ranks to start the season.
Yeah, I think the savvy move from the Jets front office would probably be to trade back from that number 2 pick. They're not trying to win anything at this point. They are firmly in a rebuild. So trade back from 2, acquire some picks. There's a lot of buzz about, teams wanting to move up to 2 to get Jeremiah Love. Ty Simpson doesn't sound like anybody at the top of the draft very interested in him. So they could probably trade back in the middle of round 1, still get the guy that would make most sense for their team building philosophy and get extra picks on top. So we'll see how that all shakes out. But now for the probably the best part of a fantasy football show. We're going to talk about the running backs here, and we got to lead off with Kenneth Walker going to the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, I wrote about this one, and it's really interesting if you look at the history of Andy Reid running backs. Like, I think there's a handful of guys that jump out as being like the bell cows under Andy Reid who were really good in fantasy football. Brian Westbrook, LaShawn McCoy, Jamal Charles, Kareem Hunt. All 4 of those running backs are wildly different types of players stylistically. Like none of them bring the same thing to the table. So when I look at Ken Walker, I think if you had to put him in one of those buckets, like he's kind of a little bit of LaShawn McCoy, right? A lot of the freelancing, dancing in the backfield, looking for the cutbacks, all that sort of stuff. And where Seattle wasn't willing to live with that because of the losses you take on first down and the losses you take near the goal line, we have seen that Andy Reid is willing to just give a guy like that volume and live with the big plays, even if it means some downside. So I get excited about this, but am I just kind of coping and talking myself into a potential big workload? Or do you think that's what Walker gets in Kansas City?
Well, no, it's fantasy investors were looking for upside plays, right? At great prices. I don't know that we're going to get a great price on Kenneth Walker for very long. I harken back to, 2020, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who just by getting drafted by the Chiefs rocketed into the first round of an ADP and was a disappointment. I mean, from both NFL and fantasy perspectives. Like last offseason, I was one of Walker's biggest pushers, right? I was if I wasn't the engineer of the hype train, I was certainly the conductor. But there are some realities that we saw Seattle have to deal with. One is availability. That's going to always be an issue with him. Is he going to show up for training camp and be available 1 out of every 4 days or whatever? Did Seattle feel like they needed to preserve him, or did they want to preserve him for the end of the season? I mean, those are questions that we'll find out the answers to. Also, the thing that you mentioned about Andy Reid and the success of various types of backs, I think says more about Andy Reid than it does about those backs. And for that, I am optimistic. And look, he goes into a good offense. There's a good offensive line. So I thought Travis Etienne would be a better fit here with bring a little more receiving, a little more versatility. Kenneth Walker, again, would like us to know he is a very good receiver, that he played that position in high school. So I'm here. I feel like the price might rise higher than I'm willing to chase it. But I am chasing right now.
Absolutely. And I think, let's try to put an actionable one here. Like, where's your cutoff point for you? Like, if he gets into the back of round 2, is that too expensive? Middle of round 2, do you have to will you chase him all the way into round 1? Where do you think is that point that you're willing to say, like, you know what, it's just a little bit too rich for me. I'm out at that cost.
In early drafts, until I get more news, it's probably going to be that second round range. There's still some backs I like a lot better, or I feel a lot more comfortable with. He went in the 3rd round of the most recent draft that I'm in. I think that was I think that pick came at the start of free agency. So this may have been a move that came right as free agent, right as he got signed. I'm trying to look at the timestamp on this pick. So he jumped right up into the middle of the 3rd round. He may have gone higher. He may go higher in the next rounds. Round 2, I'm looking at the players going ahead of him: Robinson, Gibbs, McCaffrey, Jonathan Taylor, Etienne, Genty, Jeremiah Love. People are going to be chasing him up. I would probably take Kenneth Walker over Jeremiah Love at this point. James Cook, Amari and Hampton got some help in free agency. I think I like him an awful lot. Saquon Barkley, Chase Brown, Derrick Henry, and now we're starting to get into Kenneth Walker territory for me.
And I think I would prefer Kenneth Walker ahead of quite a few names that you
Right.
mentioned there. And of course, we could be looking at a slow start to the season. Like this
Sure.
Chiefs offense hasn't been great for the last couple of years. And now you remove Patrick Mahomes at the early part of the season. It could be even worse. But I think the hope here is that Kenneth Walker is just a workhorse late in the year, gets the Chiefs back on track, and you're looking at RB1 production down the stretch. All right, next guy we want to talk about here, Travis Etienne stays in, or I'm sorry, stays in the Southeast, but in a different conference here. Goes to the New Orleans Saints. Got to be honest, not crazy about this one. And I think that talking about Travis Etienne, we can't even really have the discussion without knowing what's happening with Alvin Kamara. Because if Alvin Kamara is still a New Orleans Saint next year, that doesn't make me feel great about Travis Etienne. Of course, if he retires, gets traded, released, something like that, then I could talk myself into Etienne as an RB2. But with him being on a multi-year deal, I don't know if they have plans to just give him the reins and give him that same very volume-heavy workload that he got in Jacksonville.
Like I think he will get a good volume. I question like one of the issues last year for Alvin Kamara. I thought was the lack of targets early in the season in games where he his targets ramped up. He'd be pretty productive. I feel like Alvin Kamara feels like Alvin Kamara's had enough. I'll check in with him in Cancun in the next few days and try and figure out what's no. I think they're planning for a post Kamara future right now.
Right.
And you're right. I'm not as enthusiastic about this, but I'll say this. He has more of a proven track record than Kenneth Walker at the high end of the running back class. So they were the top two available. His track record is better. He has a couple of top 10 seasons. Kenneth Walker does not have that. He's carried the load Etienne has in his time in Jacksonville. Kenneth Walker has yet to do that. So there's things I like, but I don't love the landing spot.
Yeah, it's not a great landing spot, but of course the Saints did look good towards the end of the year. I just worry a little bit. Kendra Miller coming back from the injury. Devin Neal showed some flashes last year. And then, like we said, Alvin Kamara, of course, if he is still there, he's going to command touches. So long term, I think there's reason for excitement here. You know, he got a massive contract. The Saints clearly value him, but 2026 could be a little bit shaky. We'll get more news as the offseason
I did
goes
draft him at the last pick of the third round. He went after Walker in the most recent draft. So and after Travion Henderson. So I may have caught him right on signing there.
Yeah, and if Alvin Kamara does move on, I think that end of the third round is a very good value there. Next guy we're going to talk about, Javonte Williams returns to Dallas, and I love this, man. It just like makes my heart happy to see Javonte Williams valued by a team. You know, he looked good last year, averaged 19 opportunities per game, double-digit touches in every single game. We did see the efficiency trail off a little bit at the end of the season, but either way, I'm not exceptionally worried about this. Good offense, good workload, and his efficiency not quite back to what it was pre-injury, but much better than it was the last couple of years. So Javonte Williams still just 25 years old. Like, we feel like this guy has been in the league for a decade now, still very much so on the right side of the age curve, tied with Dallas for the next 2 years. Hard not to be excited about this.
This is great. You know, the cliche, sometimes the best move is no move. This is a prime example of why that's a cliche. And look at the way this offense has been set up to, I mean, I think there was a lot of people who expected it to be, them not to run the ball a lot, right? I think they want to be very balanced, and we saw it last year. And having this Clayton Adams coming over from Arizona, the offensive line coach, to serve as offensive coordinator, should have been our signal that, hey, this is going to, what the job he did in Arizona with the rushing attack there was phenomenal. What he's done in Dallas is also phenomenal. They got strong offensive linemen. The passing game makes it hard for opposing defenses to load up the box. So just so much going on there that works in Javonte Williams' favor, and not the least of which is Javonte Williams. He's just playing good.
And he also gets the high value touches. He gets targets. He gets goal line work. Part of a good offense. Like I said, this is a very good landing spot. And I think there's still kind of this mindset that Javonte Williams hasn't returned from the injury, the tail off in production at the end of the year. He didn't necessarily help people win leagues. So I think that because of that, there's going to be a value for Javonte Williams in drafts this year. Next one, we want to talk about Rachaad White going to the Commanders, linking up with his college quarterback. Jaden Daniels and Rachaad White were together, combined for over 2,000 rushing yards in 2 years together at Arizona State. I love this fit for Rachaad White. It makes a ton of sense to get him in there. Of course, the big question, what's going to happen in a month and a half at the NFL draft? Because I think if Washington's sitting there at 7 and Jeremiah Love's still on the board, then all of the excitement for Rachaad White just comes crashing down. But if he can make it through the draft unscathed, is it crazy to think that we're looking at, just a plug and play fantasy RB2 here?
Yeah, I think with running back one upside, we saw it 2 years ago. 2
3
years ago,
years
he's
ago.
a running
Yeah,
back
3
for
years ago. Yeah.
tons of targets, right? I mean, like that's the pathway to success for pretty much every high end running back is if you get a bunch of targets. We saw Brees Hall turn a bunch of targets into a similar outing that same year, I believe. So. So playing time opportunities are one of the things I like about Javonte Williams is I understand what the role is going to be. It feels like it's locked in. I feel less like that with White, but I feel like he's worth some shots at this point. Until I get that certainty, I'll probably be drafting with abandon, probably too high, because I think it's a great landing spot for him. And we'll see. I don't know what David Blau's offense is going to look like, but the talk is, the Commanders are pretty excited about it. Having Jaden Daniels, a healthy Jaden Daniels, is good. Another thing that's going to keep opposing defenses honest. So I like the landing spot today.
Right. And I think the potential downside here is that Rachaad White, he's going to get a lot more checkdowns from Tom Brady and Baker Mayfield than he
Correct.
will from Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels is going to use his legs a little bit more. But one of the biggest problems that we saw, Jacory Krosky-Merritt, there were a lot of flashes, but Jacory Krosky-Merritt did take a lot of losses. He wasn't effective as a pass blocker or a receiver. So
Correct.
I think that we could look at Rachaad White getting a lot of the early down work just because he does have that veteranness to him where he knows how to get downhill quickly. He keeps coaches happy, might not have the big play upside that we want to see, but just a sound veteran who can handle a big workload as we saw just a few years ago.
I think the perception of him as being just a receiving back, because that's what he's been the last few years, is probably going to throw some people off, and they should probably remember he's capable of handling a featured role if given it.
Absolutely. Now you talk about it, sometimes the best move is no move. J.K. Dobbins back to the Broncos. This is the best move, right?
My favorite. Yeah, I like it. We have some clarity and understanding of what the roles were with both him and RJ Harvey in the mix. I think RJ Harvey was probably better being in that secondary piece than he was being the primary piece. Yeah. But I think J.K. Dobbins is an overlooked player. He's and I know why. It's because not everyone is injury agnostic like me. I don't care how many times you've been hurt. Like I'm not into chronic injuries, but chronically injured. It's a collision sport, and he's in a collision position. I mean, it's going to happen. As long as he's in the locked and upright position, he can be super productive. And we saw that last year. I expect us to see more of it again this year. And I expect him to be a great value in draft because of the injury history and, and the memories of last year. And people will be quick to forget when last year, the numbers last year, his career average is 5.2 yards per carry. Last year, 772 yards, 905 yards the year before. Those were the most in back-to-back seasons of his career, 13 combined rushing touchdowns over the last 2 seasons. He's an impact player when he's on the field.
And, his rookie season feels like it was so long ago at this point, but he was looking like potentially the best running back in that rookie class. That rookie class with Jonathan Taylor and DeAndre Swift, like J.K. Dobbins was the one that was separating himself from the bunch late in that season. Of course, the injuries have piled up, but this was like Javonte Williams, a guy that came into the league so young. So, us in fantasy, we look at J.K. Dobbins as this dusty old veteran, and then R.J. Harvey is this new young blood year 2 guy. There's only 2 years separating these guys. J.K. Dobbins is 27. R.J. Harvey is 25. So J.K. Dobbins still very much so has a future ahead of him. They gave him a 2-year deal. And Sean Payton has just been singing his praises since before he even showed up there. There was the whole story about him like whining and dining him before they signed him. And we saw that he was the preferred back when both were healthy last year. So
running back 18 when he went down when his season ended. And by the way, Harvey was running back 24 over that same span. So there's room for both of them to produce.
Which we have seen historically in a lot of Sean Payton offenses where there are 2 running backs that can get theirs. So we'll be drafting J.K. Dobbins a lot this year. Tyler Allgeier to Arizona. Not crazy about this one, Bob. When I'm looking at this, Trey Benson's still there. They brought James Conner back. They re-signed Bam Knight. Now we got Tyler Allgeier in the mix. This to me just I'm okay just saying like I might not draft any Cardinals running backs this year, and I'll let everyone else deal with that headache.
I'd probably let someone else be the hero as well, unless the price. Look, I think Allgeier is there to be the lead back. I think Connor, to me, though, is capable of still being that when we last saw him play. I don't know what Trey Benson's capable of. I know we've talked about it a little bit, but, you go back to last year, the meniscus was torn. He had the repair, came back to practice. I can remember the day. It was late November. There was a specific practice. Theo Mackey from the Arizona Republic reported on it, where he reached down and grabbed the knee. We haven't heard a word about that knee since. Not a word. Like I went out and looked again just to double check. I'm writing about it for this week's Fantasy Notebook. Check that out at the site on Sunday, people. And to me, this is a sign that they don't think they're going to get anything from Trey Benson. So we'll see how it plays out. I'm with you. I mean, I think it's a little bit too too diluted a pool for me to dip into right now. But if the price is right, if people feel the same, Tyler Allgeier has been super effective in a limited role. He's really good at the outside zone scheme. We'll see if they run a little bit of that under Matt LaFleur. Or Mike LaFleur. Got my LaFleurs mixed up. So like I have hope for him. Like if there was one I was going to take a chance on, it's him. It just has to be at the right price.
I heard a good mnemonic device once. It was actually a YouTube commenter because I said Mike LaFleur once talking about the Green Bay coach, and he said, no, Matt, TT, Titletown. That's how you remember it. And it's just stuck in my head ever since. I love a good mnemonic device.
It is helpful. I will say this. So, Arizona, I don't know that they're going to be better this year. And if they're not better, I think we're going to see a lot of Jacoby Brissett as things stand today. I know everyone doesn't want him to be the starter because he went 1-11 as a starter, but the numbers were so glorious that I'm still rooting for that. So this is a little wish casting, but I don't see them making moves that are going to make the defense materially better. And so that's going to mean the offense is going to be playing from behind a lot, and that doesn't bode well for the running backs.
Here's what I will say about like fantasy football ADP. I don't know how it's going to shake out, but we ran a poll from the company account saying, who do you think scores the most points? Tyler Allgeier was the overwhelming favorite in that poll, which tells me that he is going to be getting drafted way higher than James Conner and Trey Benson. I don't know what the upside case is for Tyler Allgeier. Never been much of a pass catcher. We don't expect this to be a great offense. So I think like rather than paying up for Tyler Allgeier, who I think probably settles into that dead zone running back area, if James Conner and Trey Benson are falling to like the very end of your draft, I think that there's at least upside there worth taking a shot on. They could be nothing, but they're also probably going to be close to free in draft. So I think that's where I'll be placing my chips just based on the value. David Montgomery to the Texans. Love this move. For the Texans, man, they have shown us their cards. We know what they want to do here. They want to bring in these veterans with a lot of miles on their legs. And yeah, I mean, we saw with Nick Chubb, we saw with Joe Mixon. Now we're seeing it with David Montgomery. Hopefully his future can fare a little bit better than those other guys.
Well, I thought like Joe Mixon for a year was phenomenal, right? The usage, the red zone usage, all the things you want to see. I think David Montgomery's ideally suited for this. I have concerns about the offensive line this year. And I'd like to see CJ Stroud rebound, but having a good running game, which they pretty much lacked last year, can be a difference maker. So I think they're going to lean heavily into Montgomery. There's no need to preserve him for anything. It's going to be all systems go for him. And I like this. I mean, without Mixon, the Texans didn't have the kind of guy that they had for Stroud's greatest success. So I think this makes a big difference. Woody Marks isn't that guy. And I think David Montgomery has a better chance of emerging as that.
Yeah, we saw Joe Mixon just like 100 yards and a touchdown every single week, it felt like, before he ended up.
It's a volume-based production.
Yeah, and I think that, David Montgomery, Joe Mixon, pretty similar play styles. Like they can do a lot of the same things. It wouldn't surprise me if we get similar production from David Montgomery going into his age 29 season. Next one we're going to talk about, Bob, and we didn't even talk about this guy last week, but Chris Rodriguez signing with the Jaguars. This is one that I think is flying under the radar for a lot of people, but I wrote about it last night. I am very intrigued. I don't know, excited might not be the right word, but intrigued. We look at the connection here. Liam Cohen kind of started his ascension as a coach at Kentucky, where he leaned on Chris Rodriguez as the very much so the workhorse in that offense. When he came back to Kentucky 2 years later, he was quoted saying, like, it is going to be really tough without Chris Rodriguez, a guy that we can give the ball to and know we're getting 4 yards, whether it's blocked for him or not. We've also got James Gladstone raving about Chris Rodriguez, saying that he plays like a superhero. And then you look at the efficiency metrics from last year, every efficiency metric I care about: yards after contact per attempt, broken tackle rate, success rate. He is top 5 across the board. So had a sneakily efficient season last year, gets reunited with a coach who has really liked to lean on him. And then you look at the difference, Bashal Tutin is that big game hunter that's going to bounce around in the backfield, try to make something happen. Chris Rodriguez is that hammer that's going to pick up 4 yards and really earn the trust of coaches. So intrigued, I think is the best word, but interested to see where ADP shakes out for this backfield.
Sadly disappointed would be my as a Bashal Tutin dynasty investor. I would like to see him have a clear path to workload. I don't know that he's not still going to be the guy. I think probably he will be. I mean, this is the regime that invested in him in the draft, and he does. We did see signs of it last year, but you're right. I mean, Rodriguez was no accident. This is they didn't just stumble across him in the alley. They clearly had a plan, and he was part of it. So it's interesting for, those with what Allen shares. You wonder if that buries him a little bit or where he's at. Maybe he's just a career special teamer. We know his receiving equity and pass blocking are great, but maybe he's just never going to be a thing for us. So that, I think more than being excited about Rodriguez, I'm a little intrigued and disappointed about what it means for the other pieces there.
Absolutely. And I think that's the biggest takeaway here. But again, waiting to see where ADP kind of shakes out. I don't think there's going to be a lot of buzz for Chris Rodriguez. My guess is that
No.
Bashal Tutin's probably going 4 to 6 rounds ahead of him in drafts once the dust settles here. And this is one where I will be more than happy to just take the cheaper of the backs, assuming that there's a big chasm between their costs. Next guy we want to talk about, Rico Dowdle to the Steelers. I mean, this very much so feels like the Steelers backfield from 2 years ago. Najee Harris and Jalen Warren. Now we've got Rico Dowdle and Jalen Warren. Feels pretty similar to me.
Almost an even split. Not what Rico Dowdle wanted. He thinks he should have a featured role. He made a pretty good argument for that last year when given a featured role. He was pretty dominant. I don't know if he would have held up under that workload all along. And there were games where he was not as effective, obviously, as the 2-game stretch against Miami and Dallas where the huge totals came. But there were games where he was still effective. So, and there may be games in Pittsburgh where he's effective. I think Mike McCarthy, you look at the overall numbers for his career, it's going to be a pass-happy offense. Maybe that works more in Jalen Warren's favor. But right now, this is going to be I think it's about what you said. And I think in those days, Najee Harris was slightly ahead of Jalen Warren, and they moved on from Najee for a reason. I thought they wanted more out of Warren. Last year, we saw they didn't get it. So, there's an opportunity here, but don't overpay.
And I think another takeaway here, Caleb Johnson. That's probably not happening. Yeah, I don't think we can get excited. Maybe in some other world, future seasons. The one last thing I want to say about this backfield, though, we saw last year the Steelers really prioritized pass blocking, and I think that's why we saw Kenneth Gainwell getting so involved. Jalen Warren is a fantastic pass blocker as well. That is something that Rico Dowdle isn't great at. So when you've got a 40-something-year-old immobile quarterback back there, you want a running back who's going to help keep that quarterback upright. And I worry a little bit that if Dowdle struggles there, we could see the workload shift to Warren. So of these two backs, I think I'm going to prefer Warren to Dowdle. But again, all just kind of comes down to cost and seeing how ADP shakes out here. Next guy we want to talk about, no longer Kenneth. He's going Kenny Gainwell with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Again, I don't think we need to spend a whole ton of time here because I think this is just like a 1-to-1 replacement for Rachaad White.
Yep. Same complementary piece, passing asset. We saw Gainwell serve really well in that and more. Like, I would have loved to see him get a more robust opportunity. I don't think he's going to get that in Tampa Bay.
And next guy we can talk about, again, one that we don't have to spend a lot of time on, Aaron Jones returning to the Vikings. Happy for him. If he's healthy, he's probably an RB1. But if he's healthy is a very, very, very big qualifier there.
Well worth the 6th to 8th round pick you'll have to pay for him, and knowing he has a role, but also knowing the risks involved and being able to mitigate those risks by having other pieces in your roster.
Yeah, I mean, just 2 years ago, we saw him 4th in the league in weighted opportunities. He gave us an RB1 season. He stayed healthy. And then he got hurt last year. And I feel like that's just been the story of Aaron Jones's career. Like, when he's healthy, this guy's awesome, but he just has these nagging injuries that have piled up going into his age 32 season. I'm sure a lot of the risk will be baked into his cost, but there's absolutely still upside here, especially with Kyler Murray, hopefully just getting the offense a little bit better than what we saw from JJ McCarthy last year. Isaiah Pacheco to the Detroit Lions. Great news for Jahmyr Gibbs, right? That's the major takeaway here, Bob.
That's the only takeaway here. You've got to have a backup, right? And now they have one in Isaiah Pacheco, who has not been very effective in all the things that they asked David Montgomery to do, short yardage, goal line, all those things. Just Isaiah Pacheco, bless him, he runs hard. If his opponent was the ground, he would be a winner every single play, but that's not how it goes. It's just been a struggle. We haven't seen the same guy we saw as a rookie. And even then, like, he was running back 36, as a 7th round pick. That's what made him stand out, right? Mm-hmm. Was the fact that he was an outlier who came in and did something. He has not done much since. Injuries have been a problem. So great news, Jahmyr Gibbs.
The other thing I'll say too is I think that there's this idea that Detroit is going to split their backfield and that Jahmyr Gibbs is just coming off the field as soon as they get inside the red zone, because we did see that during the Ben Johnson era. With Ben Johnson out of the picture last year, Jahmyr Gibbs saw a huge increase in red zone and goal line work. So I think there's this idea that Isaiah Pacheco is now in the Jamal Williams role or the David Montgomery role, and he's going to get double-digit touchdowns, when I think the reality is that maybe Ben Johnson likes that sort of split, as we saw last year with Kyle Monangai, but I don't think Dan Campbell does. I think Dan Campbell Campbell just says, hey, Jahmyr Gibbs is our best running back. He is effective near the goal line as well, and we are just going to keep him on the field as much as we possibly can. I don't think that there's any path for fantasy relevance for Isaiah Pacheco that doesn't involve something catastrophic happening to Jahmyr Gibbs.
Stop.
Next guy we'll talk about, Keaton Mitchell. Going with the Chargers. Bob, every year I do this like very deep article where I just do write-ups on every single player from a dynasty perspective. And 3 off seasons ago, or was it 2 off seasons ago, whatever it was, after Keaton Mitchell's rookie season, I labeled him Arbitrage Devon Achane. And now he lands with Mike McDaniel. I mean, is that what we're looking at here? Just Devon Achane usage?
I don't think that's an accident. No, we're not looking at that because Omari Hampton's there.
Right.
We're looking, but is it change of pace? Like I could see him getting something done. Like I've been long a bandstander of Keaton Mitchell because why? He's fast. Matt Waldman is somewhere just knows exactly why, because I'm addicted to speed, and that speed on the field is something that Keaton Mitchell brings in, that playmaking ability. And we've seen him be a super effective change of pace in Baltimore when he's healthy and when they have another back leading the way. So that's my expectation for him. Like as a running back 4 on your roster, or someone who can provide depth on bye weeks or something, assuming he earns that kind of change of pace role, maybe someone worth having to help you avoid a 0 with some upside to maybe take some of the distance.
And it's the off season, so we feel good about the Chargers, right?
For sure.
As of now, they're all healthy.
I feel really good about the Chargers.
Joe Alt coming back, Rashawn Slater coming back. Like, there's a lot of reasons.
You add another blocking tight end, Kolar. So yeah, they've done a lot of things. Done a lot of favors to the guys we like there, and the guys we like, of course, are Justin Herbert and Omari Hampton.
And you talked about Omari Hampton at the top of the show. I mean, one of my favorite running backs. Like, I'd have no problem paying like a mid to late first round pick.
Probably going to have to.
You don't have to. He's fallen into the second round.
Barely in the second round. I've seen him go. I've seen him go from. I was in a draft where he went 4th overall. I mean, there are people who are super high on him. That was Howard Bender from Fantasy.
I've got him 6th.
Yeah,
I've got him 6th in my rankings. I mean, I think that teaming him up behind that offensive line with the threat of a pass game, Mike McDaniel's there, plenty of reason to be excited. Now let's talk about the receivers. We've got a lot of receivers to discuss here. First and foremost, DJ Moore. Bob, I don't know if you read it or not. Matt Harmon wrote a fantastic article about this because he had kind of read these tea leaves for the last year or so. And when he talked to Josh Allen and when he talked to DJ Moore, he kind of connected the dots here that I think this just makes so much sense. And I talked about this a lot last offseason and during the year. DJ Moore just isn't a fit for the Ben Johnson offense. That is predicated on timing and being on your spot. And DJ Moore is just kind of a freelance wide receiver. He's going to get open, and that's what works perfectly with Josh Allen. So this, good for Josh Allen, good for DJ Moore, good for Caleb Williams and Colson Loveland and Luther Burden and Rome Odunze. Like, everybody wins from this trade.
I agree with that. And, let's remember, if he wasn't a great fit in the Ben Johnson offense, he was in Joe Brady's offense. Last time we saw them working together in Carolina, it was a career year or thereabouts for Moore. So playing with a lesser quarterback, I'll suggest, than Josh Allen. So yeah, I have high hopes for this one. I think the thing we got to remember in Buffalo, and maybe they're not done, but Brady's been preaching one thing to Josh Allen. Throw to the open man. There is not a designated like, hey, we're throwing to this guy. Don't target. It's throw to the open man. Don't focus on a single receiver. DJ Moore will probably get open a fair amount in this offense, but that's always something to keep in mind with this receiving core.
And you talk about it, we saw him really succeed in a Joe Brady offense. You know where else we saw him succeed? In a Justin Fields offense, where Justin Fields regularly playing out of the structure of the offense, running around with his hair on fire, and then just ripping a ball to DJ Moore off script. I think we're going to see a lot of that in Buffalo as well. So excitement all around for everybody touched by this trade. Alec Pierce back to the Colts. Very good player. Got a massive contract. I don't know. I don't want to be the wet blanket on Alec Pierce here, but I think this is one of those guys that, like, could he back end his way into a wide receiver 1 season because he catches double-digit touchdowns? Absolutely. But I don't know if I'm expecting a huge role change here. I think his role as that downfield receiver opens up the underneath stuff for Tyler Warren and Josh Downs and the run game. And I think that he is an integral part of this Colts offense. But I do worry that this contract and Mike Pittman being gone is going to really steam him up drafts to a point that I'm not comfortable drafting him. I don't know your take here, Bob.
Probably so. Just after this move, I think I drafted him in round 4, I want to say, which felt like
a little rich,
but I wanted to make the move.
Right.
And so, like, I guess, what was it, round 4? No, it was actually the start of round. It was, have this wrong. It's to start around 6. Maybe people just miss out. I feel really good about
that's
that.
very justifiable. Yes.
But I do think like with more volume, we might see a completely different player, right? Like, I mean, we're looking at a guy who put up great numbers without the volume. Only 3 receivers. AJ Brown in 2019, Mike Williams in 2019 have done 1,000 yards on 90 or fewer targets, and that's what Pierce did last year. Matt Waldman will argue that he is a much more well-rounded receiver than we think. In fact, Waldman, I talked to him about this. He said he felt Pierce could develop into a player closer in style to Justin Jefferson because both players are skilled vertical weapons with hand speed, timing, toughness at the catch point, but they can also deliver on timing routes. So I think this is, once again, I'm looking at what the Colts, who invested in him. Colts, the people who were with him every single day and see everything about him, how he works on and off the field, all those things. So I'm pretty optimistic. I would be worried if the price rose up precipitously. I probably wouldn't chase it up. But as long as he's a reasonable price, I'll probably be interested.
And I think this is also great news for Tyler Warren and Josh Downs, because I think we just had too many guys doing the same things. Like, Michael Pittman, Tyler Warren, Josh Downs, they all want to operate middle of the field in those intermediate areas and the short areas of the field. So I think now just removing one of those, it's kind of an addition by subtraction thing. I think this is great news for Tyler Warren, great news for Josh Downs, and also great news for Michael Pittman, I think, who lands with the Steelers. Just feels like, I don't know, can't really quantify it, but like feels like an Aaron Rodgers receiver. Also feels like a Pittsburgh Steeler. Like, this to me just makes a lot of sense. He's that big-bodied, physical guy, not afraid to ball guys in the run game, will catch those balls across the middle of the field, creates a big, easy target for Aaron Rodgers to hit. I love this landing spot. I do worry that it kind of, I don't want to say makes DK Metcalf was already on the fringe.
I think we were just
relevance.
describing, though, DK Metcalf, right? Like, all the things. Like, so is Pittman, marginally better than DK Metcalf, or are they just going to, cut into each other's workloads? I think the reasons for optimism here is the Mike McCarthy offense. Again, we're going to see a more passing volume. I do think, those are the kind of guys that, Aaron Rodgers likes to throw to, guys that'll go up and win 50-50 balls, things like that. So I'm optimistic. I think it's a better spot for him. I'm not going to be chasing him in drafts.
Yeah. And I think that DK Metcalf, obviously has athleticism that Pittman doesn't, but I think Pittman has better ball skills. So I think there are some, differences here. They're both big-bodied physical receivers, but I think this works well for what they're trying to build in Pittsburgh. Wan'Dale Robinson reunited with Brian Daboll, goes to the Tennessee Titans, gets himself a big, fat contract. And the question we had last week, Bob, was what Wan'Dale Robinson are we going to see with a new team? Is he going to be that guy that just plays near the line of scrimmage as an extension of the run game, or is he going to play downfield like we saw him doing with Russell Wilson last year? I think reuniting with Brian Daboll probably tells us that we're looking at a bit more of the former, perhaps.
Well, yeah, probably. That's my lean right now, but maybe we'll see what happens in the draft, or if they add another piece. I think he's the best receiver, or clearly the most proven, just because he's been on the field more, but also the production. I mean, he's been very good over the course of his time. He's the only Giants 1,000-yard receiver, not named Malik Neighbors, with 1,000 yards in the last couple of years. Averaged over 90 catches the last 2 years. He's a high volume target who can work all parts of the field. I think we've seen it. He comes in, helps his younger teammates get up to speed in the Brian Daboll offense. So I like this move an awful lot. I'm not going to get overly enthusiastic from a fantasy perspective, but man, he was very good last year when given that lead role. I wouldn't totally underestimate him if he slips down in drafts. Don't overlook him.
And right now, Calvin Ridley is still on the team. I think we all
still
assumed that he'd be released. So we don't know if maybe he is, maybe he's going to stick around. But when I look at the other receivers here, whether it's Calvin Ridley, Allgeier Minor, Jameer DK, they all like to operate a little bit deeper downfield. So I think that them being those kind of downfield guys that are going to be running their routes 15, 20 yards downfield, it does open the underneath stuff for Wan'Dale Robinson. So we could easily see another season where he's getting 140, 150 plus targets in this offense. And also, I think what gets lost in discussion here, Cam Ward, pretty darn good at the end of the season. Struggled early.
2 touchdowns a game the last 4 games. The interceptions went by the wayside. I'm with you on this one. I think Cam Ward might be in a better spot than people realize.
And I wouldn't blame anybody who wasn't watching late season Titans games, but Bob and I were, and Cam Ward looked good. So if you didn't see it for yourself, just trust our opinions on it. Had a strong finish to the season. George Pickens returns to the Dallas Cowboys. And this is, older news. We got this. It's a franchise tag, quickly followed up by George Pickens saying that he wants a long-term contract. So I have a feeling this is going to be quite the saga, Bob. probably not the last time we'll be talking about George Pickens and whether or not he will be playing this season.
Yeah, I think this, they have until July 15th to work out a long-term deal. I think until they have that worked out or until that deadline hits, we're going to have a lot of that angsty uncertainty of people not showing up for workouts. Like maybe Pickens proves us all wrong or shows up. I think, last year might have been a little bit of an anomaly in terms of CeeDee Lamb's injury situation and stuff, but the Cowboys are going to throw the ball a fair amount. There is room for both those guys. I still think CeeDee Lamb's a better player and a more consistent producer over time. I would probably prefer to have him. I'd be willing to pay more for him. And I think the Pickens price, though, it's not prohibitive. And look, we plenty of times see wide receiver ones from the same team in fantasy. So don't let that scare you off. I'm more scared about probably the off-field concerns and issues and maturity level stuff than probably other people would be, or maybe not, but that's probably the biggest concern for him. And last year it was no concern at all.
Yeah, and this to me, like everything we've talked about for years with the Cincinnati Bengals offense, right? Everyone's like, how can you possibly take Jamar Chase in the first round and T. Higgins in the second round? Almost no difference here. A hyper-consolidated offense to two very talented players with a lot of pass volume. So George Pickens, I think, probably settles into the second-round pick, as a second-round pick if we get certainty that he'll be playing, and I think that's a totally justifiable cost for him. Romeo Doubs going to the New England Patriots. This very much so feels like a lateral move, right? Like we were hoping, because Green Bay has these very specialized roles for the receivers, and we said, just imagine if Romeo Doubs can like play X receiver somewhere, get hyper targeted. But no, he goes to the Patriots, where they also kind of have hyper specialized roles, and Romeo Doubs kind of feels like that guy who's going to be the chain mover, the red zone target, the same kind of player he was in Green Bay.
Yeah, younger Stephon Diggs. They're not done. They're not done in New England. I think, there's still, the AJ Brown talk will persist until it doesn't. There's talk that he won't move until June because of the cap implications. So we'll see how this one plays out. I would not chase Romeo Doubs like he's going to be the true wide receiver one there. I think all those guys are going to be value plays at the wide receiver position if nobody else shows up. And it'll be similar to Green Bay, where 1 week it'll be one, next week it'll be another. It'll be kind of a whack-a-mole.
I still like Kayshon Boutte, who's probably one of the cheaper of the Patriots wide receivers, probably be falling late in drafts, but when healthy, he has looked very good in his young NFL career. So we'll see. I think Doubs probably does get steamed up a little bit higher than I'm comfortable with. A couple more guys to talk about here. Mike Evans with the 49ers. I know, Bob, you are a big Mike Evans guy, and you don't really get scared off by age. My goodness, when I see Mike Evans getting up there in age, going to a San Francisco team that really feels like they're on their last leg before this window slams shut on them, I'm not very excited about this move.
I'm with Mike Evans. The 49ers are one piece away from a Super Bowl, and he's the piece.
All right.
Look, I'm not going to get carried away because this is going to be all about the price for me. If I get the lead receiver in this 49ers offense at a reasonable price, I'm going to be happy to have that. I think Brock Purdy will carry the day. Evans still produced at a high level, 2.3 yards per route, ranked 14th among all wideouts over the past 2 seasons. But he's got to be on the field. And apparently working next to that, the power plant in San Francisco, I've got concern now. No, it's like there's going to be big changes here. You're going to have no Jawan Jennings, almost certainly. Kendrick Bourne's gone. Sky Moore's already gone. Who are we left? Ricky Pearsall and DeMarcus Robinson. I think there's room. And George Kittle, obviously, starting the season, we'll see where he gets. I've seen talk of him being ready week 5. Maybe that's an optimistic outlook or not. That gives plenty of time for Mike Evans to make some hay. So I'm going to be looking to grab Mike Evans at the right price, and I'll probably get the right price because, Dave, you highlighted it. He's old, and people get scared away from that.
We all have blind spots in our analysis, and mine is definitely keeping the light on for the young guy who has dealt with injuries that I liked as a college prospect. So I'm still going to be throwing darts at Ricky Pearsall until I have reason not to. Injuries have barred the first couple of years of his career. I think Mike Evans, such a cliche, but I think he'll be one of those better in best ball guys. Like, it's still Mike Evans. He can go for 150 yards and 2 touchdowns on any given week. I do worry a little bit about the consistency just with how many weapons are here in San Francisco, but I think all that's going to be baked into his costs, and I think that he could make for a good value.
Wide receiver 3 cost right now projected for that on Football Guys. Wide receiver 36. He's probably a guy that could put up closer to wide receiver 2 numbers than wide receiver 3 numbers.
Next up, we'll go through this one quickly. Rashid Shaheed to the Seahawks. We know what he is. He's a field stretcher. He runs 50 yards downfield, running wind sprints, so JSN and AJ Barner can eat across the middle of the field. Any major takeaways here? I think the idea of Rashid Shaheed in fantasy is much cooler than the actual production we've gotten from Rashid Shaheed in fantasy.
Our intrigue has all been based on a stretch in New Orleans where he's super effective with Derek Carr. I'm not going to
chase 3 games.
Right. It was a narrow band, but it was super exciting. We have not seen that level of production in Seattle. I don't know if Seattle will ever get the production they're paying for out of him.
And, good special teamer. Alec Pierce, we talk about it. Like, that role is very important to the offense. Alec Pierce, obviously, more valuable in fantasy. I just don't think Rashid Shaheed is a guy that you're ever going to be relying on a weekly basis. Calvin Austin with the Giants. They got rid of Wan'Dale Robinson just to bring in kind of another version of Wan'Dale Robinson.
Calvin Austin's an exciting player, great speed, all those things. Has not been a consistent producer. We'll need to see something before I invest in him.
Jalen Nailor with the Raiders to wrap up wide receivers, and then we got a few tight ends to talk about. Bob, I might be galaxy braiding this one. I think they signed Jalen Nailor because they said, hey, we got that 14th overall pick from the Ravens, and we can go out and we can get ourselves a nice first-round wide receiver. And then the Max Crosby trade flip-flops, and now they're like, oh my God, Jalen Nailor's our wide receiver one. Yeah. What did we do?
We may be feeling the ripple effects of that for a while. Look, Jalen Nailor's been surprisingly good the last couple of years. And I thought, the Vikings realized this. They probably drafted Ty Felton knowing they were going to lose Jalen Nailor because he has been impressive. So, look, you don't have to be the tallest skyscraper in town in a city without many skyscrapers. So Brock Bowers is going to be the wide receiver one there, and after that, it's going to be catch as catch can, and Nailor can earn a role there.
Yep. Jeff Bell and I talked about Brock Bowers just on the episode that released yesterday. And I said 180 targets, very much so in his range of outcomes. I mean, Trey Tucker, Jalen Nailor, Jack Bash, all fun, wide receiver 2s, wide receiver 3s, but this is going to be the Brock Bowers show in Las Vegas. Let's talk about some tight ends here. Kyle Pitts returning to the Falcons. Still some old news, but kind of housekeeping at this point. We've seen effective seasons. We've seen ineffective seasons. We've seen some seasons where he's been both effective and ineffective in the same season. Kyle Pitts really kind of teased Falcons at the end of the season with that stretch in the final month. And now he's going into year 6 with the Falcons. And I feel like they still don't know what they have in him.
I think I'd love to see him find out. Maybe this Kevin Stefanski offense that's leaned heavily in tight ends in Cleveland will do the same or do some of that. Drake of London is always going to be a limiting factor for him, but we don't have the same, quarterback dynamic. If it's Michael Penix, I'm a little concerned about, Kyle Pitts because of Penix's tendency to throw or focus on Drake London. If it's Tua, maybe a little less of that, but either way, I think, drafting him as a tight end one and hoping he gets somewhere up to closer to a ceiling, which we finally got last year, but a lot of that came like in one game or so just a few games, 3 touchdowns.
Or while Drake London was injured.
While Drake London was injured and Kirk Cousins was the starter. So yeah, don't get tricked into drafting him where he finished last year.
Yeah, they got the 4 years on his rookie window. They took the 5th-year option. Now they've got the franchise tag. It feels like they're still trying to see what is this guy? What do we have in this Kyle Pitts fellow that we drafted over half a decade ago? Next up, Okonkwo to the Washington Commanders. I don't know your take on this one, Bob, and I know you're writing an article about it right now, so I don't want to spoil your thunder, but I see so many people, look at what Zach Ertz did in Washington. Now that's Okonkwo's role. That is apples to oranges. Zach Ertz is a master at finding soft spots in zones, creating big targets for the quarterback. Okonkwo is basically a slot receiver who's really fast. If you can get him the ball while he is running a route, he can take off and nobody's going to catch him, but he is not Zach Ertz. We can't make that comparison whatsoever.
Right. Ranked 9th in the league in yards after catch among tight ends last year, 342. But here's the 87
happy, of which came on one play, by the way.
Right. Here's the happy part. Here's the happy part. Ertz had 91 targets running 256 routes out of the slot. So if that's Okonkwo's wheelhouse, then hello, wheelhouse.
Yeah. And that, there's an upside case here, of course. It's all going to come down to cost. If he's falling into that tight end 20 range, I will be throwing darts.
He feels like the Deebo Samuel replacement, right? Yeah. Like you're just kind of a guy. Right. So there's something to be said there, keeping opponents a little honest when it comes to Terry McLaurin. They need more pieces to do that still. So I don't mind the move, but I'm not going to get over enthusiastic about it.
I'm stealing that from you, Bob, when I'm talking about this on future shows. I think you're bang on. He's not the Zach Ertz replacement. He is the Deebo Samuel replacement. That makes so much sense. Last guy we're going to talk about here, Isaiah Likely, a guy who you've been excited about for years, but the production just hasn't been there aside from a Thursday night football game in week 1 2 years ago. Just kind of consistently giving us tight end 2 production every single year. Has averaged between 20 and 30 receiving yards per game. What I get excited about here, Bob, not even going to talk about Isaiah Likely, but John Harbaugh brought in Isaiah Likely, brought in Pat Ricard. To me, I'm seeing the foundation being built for the same exact offense that we saw in Baltimore, just multiple tight ends on the field, a fullback on the field, heavy sets, lots of RPOs, lots of option-based concepts, and allowing Jackson Dart to run. Jackson Dart was second in rushing yards per game among all quarterbacks last year, behind only Justin Fields, averaged over 40 rushing yards per start. I'm seeing a potential ascension into that elite QB1 tier from Jackson Dart this year.
Well, we saw him there last year. I mean, when he was healthy and locked in. I mean, so it's not even ascension. It's just following up on what he did last year, maybe with a better supporting cast and likely a better overall coaching staff.
Well, that'll do it. We hit them all. There were a lot. We went just over an hour, but we were darn close to getting there. I want to thank everybody so much for taking the time to tune in. Bob is going to be a frequent here on the Football Guys Fantasy Show, so hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. I'll be back Monday with Joey Wright, Wednesday with Jeff Bell, and then we've got another show planned for next Friday as well. So stay tuned here, whether it's on audio, YouTube, Twitter, wherever you consume the show. Thank you for taking the time to hang, and I will see you on Monday.